Welcome to the Private Lender Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, Chris and Jason here. Thanks for checking out the Private Lenders Podcast. We appreciate you watching or listening to the show. Now, we're going to be talking about underwriting the use of loan proceeds. Now, we're going to touch on some legal stuff here, so make sure to consult your attorney. Typically, a foreclosure attorney is the right person to talk about these issues that we're going to discuss. Because when we're looking at these loans, which are oftentimes, well, they're always commercial loans, but they're oftentimes on residential properties, there can be some gray area of the use of the property and the use of the proceeds. And we're going to break it down because those really are the two things that you have to be careful of. Obviously, use of the property has to be an investment property, specifically not for personal consumer use. And same with the proceeds of the loan. And this mainly applies to refinances. It could be some kind of bridge loan, a cash out refi, maybe even construction completion, and where those funds are going towards.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a wake-up call for a lot of folks. Hopefully this is something you have heard. You know, this is coming from experience. I was thinking about it, and I can't say that we've ever learned the hard way with this, which is good. We've
come close.
We've come close. We've never had a lien been stripped before, or we've never, had a court rule in the borrower's favor that, wait a second, this isn't a valid loan. But we have learned, we have learned, and we want to pass that information to you so you don't get stuck with this, because I talk to too many private lenders in the Hard Money Mastermind group on a pretty regular basis. And, they'll ask me my opinion on a deal. Sounds like a home run on paper. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a sec, you can't do that. You can't do that loan. They're using it for their personal use. So let's break that down a little bit of what personal use and commercial use is in general. So, assuming everyone's doing loans on a commercial property, like an actual, commercial property, which is, not zoned residential, right? A commercial property, an office building, retail. So there's that, or the investment residential property, which is fix and flip, a rental property, an apartment building, something that is classified as a residential property, but it's still an investment residential property. So, our attorneys use a doc set, a commercial loan doc set. Sometimes it's interesting because sometimes it's hard for people to understand. It's like, yeah, this is a commercial loan. It just happens to be against a residential property. You can do a commercial loan against a residential property. It's a commercial use property, a business use property, right? It just happens to be a residential property. Now, obviously it has to be an investment use one. It can't be a primary house. It can't be a second home, right? It's for pure investment purposes. Some states differ, but, you obviously want to seek your own attorney on this based on your state. But, a lot of times these are owned or getting purchased in a business entity, right? So the entity, you're lending the money to the business entity, and then the borrowers, or I should say the managers of the entity or the owners of the entity are personally guaranteeing it. So like Chris started with, this is where the use of proceeds, and I'll tell you, we'll go through a few tips and some stories as well. But this is where the use of proceeds comes in. Somebody refinances a property. Let's say the property is worth $1 million and they own it free and clear and they need $100,000. On the collateral side, that deal is a great deal, right? It's an investment property.
10 LTV.
It's vacant. Like, collateral wise, you're good, right? That being said, you need to determine what the proceeds are going towards and potentially even document or have a statement from the borrower stating where they're going to. Because if they own a free and clear property worth $1 million and they want a loan from you for $100,000 and they're using it to pay for their kids' college, pay off consumer debt, buy a car, doesn't matter. Any of those things, you can't do that loan. You can't do that loan. It is a consumer loan. Yes, it might be on a commercial or residential property or investment residential property, but it's still, the proceeds are going towards consumer use. So unfortunately, you can't do that loan. Now, let's talk about some instances you can do that loan. And again, consult with your attorney. This may vary by state, so use this for what it's worth. This is our opinion on it. Let's say they're taking $100,000 out to renovate the house, right? You're giving them $100,000 cash out. They're going to renovate the house. And in essence, you're going to do a construction reserve. And the goal for them to renovate the house is to sell the house and flip the house. Hey, that's a commercial transaction. That's for business use. They're going to make a business profit on that, right? Let's say we did a deal recently where the lady owned a mixed use property, free and clear, and she took out money because she owns grocery stores, and she just purchased her most recent grocery store, and she needed to fill it with inventory and groceries. So she documented that for us, that all the proceeds were going to go towards filling up her retail store. Business use, right? So there's a clean, typically I think most people are smart enough to understand there's a clear distinction between what's for business purposes and what's for consumer purposes.
Yeah. So here's another tricky one that came up recently and kind of sparked this idea. And we've seen it a few times, including one time in a court proceeding, in a lawsuit, where, all right, let's use the same number. Somebody buys a property for $1 million and they financed it for $100,000. They used to live in the property, and then they moved out and rented it. And so you verify the rent with the lease and everything, clearly rental property, their primary somewhere else. And then you do the loan and it pays off that original mortgage. It matters whether or not that original mortgage was a primary residence consumer loan or an investment property loan. It does. And we found this out in court. And we were in a situation where our loan paid off another commercial loan. It was on a residential property. It was a hard money loan. We recognized the lender's name when we saw it in public record. We know who they are. They're local. And our loan paid off that loan. A couple years later, we get into litigation with the borrower. They don't want to pay us back. They sue us instead, all that mess. And they claimed that we paid off a primary residence consumer loan with our loan, which would have been trouble for us. Turns out that wasn't the case. But there are attorneys out there who specialize in this, who literally specialize in trying to make a commercial loan look like a consumer loan. And they have their playbook. We saw their playbook in that court case. And that was one of the things for sure. Another important thing is, obviously where they live and how they document stuff, how they document, like where they file taxes, where their driver's license is. But that's more about the use of the property, not the use of the proceeds. And another thing that I've found out by being in court on this stuff is that it's best to get some kind of documentation, not just an email or a letter, about where the proceeds are going, what they're being used for, them documenting their business use of this loan. But that being said, the borrower can also state that in the form of a letter, a signed letter, even a hand-printed letter is better, because it is possible that they could say, you wrote the letter and you just asked them to sign it. And then that's not as good. But all that being said, the court doesn't like to side on the side of someone who's lying. So if they lie to you and they say, oh, I'm using it to renovate this investment property, and then they go and take it and pay for their kids' college, they're going to be on the hook for that. You're not going to lose on that one. If they stated and you documented that they said, here's what we're going to use it for, and then they do something else, and then they flip their story when it comes time to go to court, the court doesn't like that. They're going to lose on that. And if you put your files together right, the lender should always win on this. The lender is not changing their story. Our story never changes. It's always, here's how we documented our file. We did a commercial loan on a residential investment property or commercial property. Our story is not going to change from that. It's the borrower that can change their story, and that's what we have to watch out for.
Well, and one thing to notice is, like, you don't want to, what's the best way to say this? You don't want to, like, document a deal that's in your favor. You want to document the truth, right? So, like, I'll give you an example. If a borrower comes to you and they're saying, hey, this is for consumer use, the deal's dead. You can't do anything with it if it's really for consumer use. What I'm sure other lenders have done in the past is, well, that's not going to work. That being said, let's just document that it's going to go towards construction or business use, or fill this out or sign this. And then you're enabling them to, in essence, lie to you so you can potentially, do the loan. Don't go down that road, right? Don't go down that road. If if it's a consumer loan, don't do it. I mean, unless you're licensed to do it and you follow all that, but these are commercial transactions. There's no point to do that. And I mean, we've seen that all the time. I mean, we've gotten loans from mortgage brokers in the past, and I'm like, something's not adding up here. Like, did they just create this business entity? Is this really going into this? And then, I pick up the phone and call the borrower and be like, hey, what are you using the proceeds for? And it's like, oh yeah, I got myself in a bind and I got to pay off, my kid's credit card. And it's like, listen, that's unfortunate, but unfortunately, I just can't do anything for you on this deal. This has to be straight business use. And also, when you're dealing with, the purpose of hard money lending and private lending for real estate investors and commercial property owners, we like using the word, like part of our mission statement, as we lend to sophisticated real estate investors. It's B2B. It's not B2C. We're not dealing with homeowners. We're not dealing with consumers. We're dealing with business folks that are having business ventures. The reason we do short-term loans is because they have an exit strategy, right? If you're doing a loan for somebody who's going to take out cash to pay off consumer debt, like, how are they going to repay your loan? If they're going to take out cash to renovate the house so then they can sell it, great. That's a good way. There's an exit strategy tied. Another thing to think about is you can't necessarily like do a loan to a real estate and to, another common one is someone does a loan for somebody who's buying a property for a family member to live in. If it's a father, mother, son, daughter, if it goes this way, you shouldn't really be doing that. If it's going this way, there's an argument that it might be kosher when I say going this way. If you're listening to this and not watching, if it's up and down, I think that's kind of direct family. I think if it's like brother, cousin, that might be, but double check with your attorney in your state on that. But it's still technically consumer loan. So I think a lot of folks fall into that trap, and you just got to be careful. And like what Chris said earlier, just document the conversation, document it all via email. Have them sign something. Don't write something for them to sign and be like, sign this, you have to, or I'm not going to give you a loan. Like, if they come to you and they say, this is going to be, what are you using the proceeds for? I'm going to renovate the property. No problem. Let's put everything in writing, do a construction draw. It'll be set up. It'll be easy. I remember there was a deal a few years ago where the guy was funding like a medical supply company that he was a part of. And not that I didn't fully believe him, but I wanted to be safe because, like Chris said, we've had some scary situations where we thought we were doing it the right way, and we could have got burned. And through the process, the title company actually wired the funds to the vendors, to the commercial vendors, like through our loan process. So,
they dispersed the settlement to the interest.
Exactly. So he didn't even get the proceeds. And he didn't care about it. I mean, he was just going to get them to pay them anyways, but just to ensure that was the case. So, so these are little things inside private lending that some people, some investors don't know, private lenders don't know. But this is an important one because we talk to too many lenders daily that kind of don't realize this. And I understand why they don't realize that, right? Like, it's like, I think, and it's actually funny. We've talked to a lot of attorneys in the past, and not all the attorneys knew the answer to this either. I remember talking specifically to a real estate attorney that does loan docs. It's nobody that we've ever used for loan docs. And their response was, as long as they're buying the property in an LLC, and signing a commercial loan doc package, that, you can't control where the money's going, and it went to their business entity because it was an LLC, and then the business entity can choose where the money's distributed to. And that's not the experience that we've had. So I would be careful.
Yeah. And it can vary by jurisdiction, but as we wrap up here, let's talk about the couple boxes to check in this process. It's like, number one, ask your borrower, and be careful if there's a broker involved and who the information is coming from. It has happened sometimes that the broker will just tell you what they think will get the deal done, not what is necessarily the truth. So get it from the borrower directly. What are they doing with the proceeds of the refinance, right? And then you document it in an email with documentation, a number of different ways. Put something on paper, keep it in your file. Number 3, discuss this subject with an attorney who knows. In our case, I've found that our foreclosure attorneys, who are litigators, are very familiar with this issue and they know it inside and out. And then 4, like, know your risks. Like, if you lose on this argument in court, the consequences could be pretty grave, and some worse than others. Like, in some jurisdictions, you might be entitled to get your money back but not collect interest. In other jurisdictions, you might get your lien stripped entirely. Think about that. Think if your first mortgage lien goes away and your $100,000 loan is now just a personal guarantee unsecured loan, which they could easily wash away with the bankruptcy, right? So know the risks. Know the risks of what you're getting into. Document everything right. Have good counsel. Be prepared. Be way more prepared than the borrower, and you'll be fine. And then you can do these loans. There are good cash out refi, bridge loans, refinance type stuff. They're good stuff. We close them every month, right? So as long as you check your boxes, do it safely, lend to the right people, and everything's going to work out fine. You're going to have a fine exit, and you can do it all over again the next day, right? Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for checking out the show, everyone. Depending on where you are watching or listening to this, if you could leave us a review, some stars, whatever it might be, it's very much appreciated, and we'll see you guys next time on the Private Lenders Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.